everyone, my name is Hilda and welcome back to my channel. As you may have guessed from the setup, today we're attempting to paint The Thing. I got him on Etsy from somebody in my country. Lo and behold, I will have their shop up on screen. And as you can see, his color is about the right size from the series, I would say. I find that he's actually pretty accurate. I have a reference off screen right by me, so I'm not gonna go in blind. Although, initially going in blind wouldn't be the end of the world because I know what colors I need to do for the stitching and for the lines. So what do I have? A bunch of brushes. These are all for acrylic paints, so that's important. Don't go painting with acrylic on your good watercolor paints. I initially would like to use my acrylic inks. I don't know if they're going to go on this plasticky whatever material comes out of a 3D printer. I'm not sure. He's very lightweight and he sits on my shoulders, so there's that. So I have these They Are Around Me acrylic inks from their FW series, and then I have an abstract acrylic ink from Sennelier. This is sanguine. It looks like coagulated blood. It's pretty disgusting, but should these guys not work, I will use these inks by Vallejo. I think it might be pronounced Vallejo in Spanish, but I'm not sure. Please don't come at me. But yeah, I have black red, which would be a definitely acceptable substitute for sanguine. I have smoke, and then I have smoky ink. So I think this would be good for doing like the dry brushing on his joints. And this would probably be an okay substitute for black, because I don't have any black acrylic. Liquid acrylic, really liquidy ones. I do have regular acrylics in which I do have black, but I think they might be a little bit too goopy. I kind of don't want to dilute them with water because it never really works out as well as using liquid acrylics, which is this, by the way. This is like flat out acrylics, but liquid. This is also what you would use, like, as well as Games Workshop paints. It's just a matter of personal preference. I prefer these guys because the Games Workshop ones, the Citadel ones, tend to dry out, whereas with these, if they do dry out, you could just remove this bit, take the dried out bit here out of it, and just continue to use them. So that's why I prefer Vallejo. And also they have a much bigger color range. So, but yeah, otherwise it's fine, But yeah, that aside, all my paint babble aside, I'm just gonna go in, attempt it. I have not gone in with any kind of sandpaper or Dremel tool or whatever because I'm worried of damaging him. I have 2 pots of water, one for dirty, one for clean, which you always should have, because the idea is you go in with your brush in the dirty water first, and if there's any paint residue left, it will come off and you won't just be like dip and have paint residue and mangled colors on your page. And then you go in with the clean water to make sure that it's just completely clean. Also, never ever leave your brush like this, hairs first. Don't put it in the water like that. It will destroy your brush, so don't ever. I'm just gonna turn on some music and paint, and you can come and do other stuff with me or just watch. And if you're crafting or making something yourself, leave it in the comments what you're making. And let's get into painting thing. And I'm back. I realized that I basically had to hold him very close to my face because of my poor eyesight, and that's why I stopped filming. So this is what I did so far. As you can see, all the scar tissue is filled in with sanguine. And yeah, it takes really, really, really well. Now, as you saw, I started painting on the inside of the hand because usually he'll be like this. So if you're just like getting a rocky start, like me, you won't really see the errors. My problem was that my brush was actually too thick. So I went and got my Interlon, which is a brush I got in Japan, but you can find them in Europe, and I'm assuming the US, well, North America and etc. as well. And this is a 3/0 brush, so it is very, very fine. And as you can see, Dada actually got a way, way better result. So I'm gonna leave this to dry, and then I'm gonna do all the stitching, and I'm also going to double check whether he has like these little red bits in between the top stitch on his hand. Well, whatever you would call this on thing. Now you might wonder why I'm going in with the dry brush the last. Well, that is because the dry brushing is just dirt. It's not actual skin tone. It's dirt he's kind of collected by running around, you know? So obviously the dirt would sit on top of the stitches and the red lining. So that's why it's going last and not first. But I will definitely explain to you how to dry brush, even if I have to paint him on camera. I will explain the technique on camera. And I will also explain, because a lot of people asked for it, how I did my painting on the Hogwarts Express, which I will have up on screen here. How I did the smoke, which is also a dry brushing technique. And yeah, so it's kind of the same thing, but on paper versus a 3D object. Also, if you like to paint wargame miniatures, well, get into it, because if you're doing it, you already know this. But if you want to get into it, same thing, just smaller scale. So I will definitely explain that. Sorry for the light, it's quite late, but as you can see, we've reached the point of the dry brushing. Now, dry brushing is really simple. You take a little bit of paint, you then, I'm gonna do it here so you can see, wipe it off just on some paper. You can do this on a kitchen towel, but I prefer like a free newspaper like this guy. So, you know, and yeah, then you just go in. And I'm using acrylic ink, so that means that if I have a little bit too much, I can just wipe over it, and then I will only keep it in like the little, you know, folds of the skin. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. Just like dry brushing all the dirt on there. For the nails, that's going to be harder because I've never actually done the nails like he has them. So and that's gonna be an adventure. And you can also, just because the top of his hand is quite dark, just start dry brushing here. And then if there's like a little bit too much on there, it won't really matter. And then you can just go in when there's a lot less on your brush, as you can see. And make sure to really get his joints, like the spots you can see in references that are a little bit dirty. So yeah. That's what I'm going for. And then you can really like see the veins on his hand and stuff. So yeah. That's a little bit too much. I'm gonna wipe over it and try again. Yeah, that's better. Some here. Take a bit more. If you're doing this on a painting, like for instance what I did with the smoke on my Hogwarts Express, I left the area that the smoke was going to go over. I purposely left like a main spot, so to speak, white, and then very lightly painted on the outside where the smoke would be thinner. And yeah, I did the same thing. I just dry brushed it in. You can do it on paper. Absolutely. Definitely going to go in a little bit harder on the fingertips because he's and this fold as well, because he's walking on his fingertips constantly, so it would make sense that they are very dirty. That's a little bit too little. See what I mean? The one thing is with, yeah, you can go in pretty directly actually. The one thing with 3D printed is that the material is quite porous. Is porous the right word? But yeah, you do get a lot of fine lines in it. So your paint might be a bit runny if you're working with acrylic inks, which I'm doing. And I did notice that the Sennelier one, the Sanguine that I used here, the red one, that went in immediately. No problem whatsoever. It feathered just a little bit. I apologize for Kiwi screaming. She just wants attention. She's fine. But yeah, so I did notice a wee bit of feathering, but like really negligible. I mean, you could just, you know, it wasn't much. It was fine. But then I went in with the Daler-Rowney FW ink on the stitches. And that was not fine at all. That feathered a lot. So what I did was I took some of my Sennelier abstract acrylics, which are proper acrylics, and I mixed them with the liquid acrylics, the acrylic ink, and that worked way, way better. Because then it was a little bit thicker, because it is not the thickest, runniest acrylic. I think it's a fine art acrylic. I'm not sure, but it is a better acrylic, quote unquote, and it's not super expensive at all. And I'm not saying that if you're going to do a project like this, just totally should go out and buy the Sennelier one. I'm sure you could do it with different brands as well and much cheaper acrylics. But I'm just saying what I was using, and I had really good results mixing them up. And this is also an FW acrylic ink, and yeah. I mean, I am using a very large dry brush, so that is to my advantage. But yeah, just saying, it's like getting some grime on his fingers. So what did you guys all think of Wednesday? Because I loved the series. I've seen it for several times now, probably more than I care to admit. I'm getting some on the nails as well, because his nails are like this kind of dry brushed as well. I am legit so stoked with how the thing came out. Yeah, I feel like I did a pretty good job. Of course, I could have done a better job, I'm sure of it. There's always room for improvement, but you know, especially his nails, because I was really worried about those. I just really like how he came out, and as well, look at the shading in the palm. I mean, ink is very good for stuff like that. Now, let's talk materials that I used and would I use them again on 3D printed objects. I would absolutely use the Sennelier abstract acrylic ink again, because that went on so smoothly. There was minimal feathering. It really holds. Now, like I said, I used the FW Daler-Rowney acrylic ink, the black one, and I had to mix it in with regular acrylics. It still doesn't really hold, because you can see that it's like kind of coming off here. So I'm going to try to maybe go in with a very fine Sharpie, just very carefully, and like try it on a bottom one first, in case it's just an absolute disaster. I will have it up on screen whether it worked or not. I used a lot of this game color. This is by Vallejo. And this is smoky ink. And I used that primarily for the nails. And it worked so well, you guys. So well. And of course, Vallejo is like a brand that is made to paint all sorts of miniatures. So I'm thinking that if you have literally no paint and you want to paint anything that is 3D printed, of course, this is just conjecture on my part. This is literally me guessing, but I'm pretty sure that Vallejo game color, if you can get it, or just anything by Vallejo, because I have painted Nerf guns with their airbrush paint and it was fine. And I don't own an airbrush, just saying. I just went in with a brush and it's okay. So I think anything by them is just always a fair guess. Now, what I will say is, usually when painting on paper, when I use acrylic inks, I kinda like the Della Rowney ones a little bit more than the Sennelier ones. But when it comes to like painting on like 3D printed objects, the Della Rowney ones, just put it out there, really let me down. They were just way too liquidy and just, yeah, I mean, great for paper, less good for this. So yeah, I was glad that I had Sanguine. Nobody's surprised that I own pretty much everything fake blood for artists. So there's that. Now let's talk brushes. This Interlon one that I switched to is kind of like an all-purpose brush. I used to use this a ton for watercoloring before I switched to my Cosmotop spin ones by, I believe, Da Vinci. But yeah, I just literally keep it in my brush book downstairs, just in case I need to work with acrylic ink or ink with a very, very fine brush. They're nigh indestructible. They're really awesome. And if you can get these, if you want to get into painting or already painting and you want a 3/0 brush, I would recommend Interlon. I think they have them even finer. Of course, you have to take very, very good care of it or you just lose all the hairs. Now, when it comes to dry brushing, do not, under any circumstance, go in with a good brush. Just no, you will destroy your brush. I have actual dry brushing brushes, but you don't need to get them. I mean, any cheap brush that, you know, is not likely to use all its hairs when you dry brush with it. I have dry brushed with an IKEA brush. You know, the little IKEA ones from the kids department when I was doing my Hogwarts Express painting, and it was not a success. I spent a lot of times using a very fine pair of pliers, getting the hairs out and correcting mistakes. So 100% would not recommend, but I'm sure that if you get like, say, if you can get those, I don't know what brands are in North America and stuff, but we have Talon's Art Creation. They also have like flat brushes. So I'm pretty sure that, I mean, you will destroy them, but they're at least cheap and, you know, it'll do the trick. You won't destroy them straight away, but they won't last nearly as long as an actual dry brushing brush does. And I can't really tell you what's going on. I mean, like, this actually says dry S. So this is a small dry brush these days. They used to be like round brushes, now they're flat. But this says shade L. So is this an actual dry brush? I don't really know. I may have like complete, I mean, if it isn't, do as I say and don't do as I do, because this poor brush, it's fine. So it feels the same thickness and softness and consistency as a dry brush, but I'm waffling. But yeah, I mean, would not dry brush with this graduate brush, even though it is also very cheap. And actually, you know, if you can't find an alternative or an actual dry brush, yeah, you will murder it eventually and fairly fast. But meh, I'm just saying, like, if you're just doing the one project, just invest in cheap brushes that won't shed, rather than getting like specific brushes you won't use otherwise. But I use dry brushing techniques fairly often these days. So for me, it made sense to go and invest in them. And I got several, I think I got like 4 or 5 brushes and I paid like 25 euros. So it wasn't super ridiculous, but it was also not mega cheap. If that makes sense? But before I start waffling incoherently, I think it's best to just quit while I'm still some kind of version of ahead. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments down below. Did you like Wednesday? Who was your favorite character? For me, it was definitely Ting and Enid. I love them so much. They're so awesome. No complaints about Wednesday or any of the other characters. I think all the actors did a great job and it was such a fun show. Glad it's been renewed. But yeah, that was it for today. As you have seen, there were cats in the reveal, and so there will not be cats as soon as I stop talking. That's it for this week, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye!